between the Route 17, make sure I get this right, Recreational Complex Committee and the Board of Selectmen. And I will invite the committee members, starting with Brian as chairman, to announce their names so that everyone knows who's here.
Brian McCarthy.
Thank you.
Joe Olesko. Mike Susker.
Jen Oliver. Ann Fisher.
Patrick Farley. Chris Donahue.
Are you, some of you alternates,
I am.
or? Okay, that's right. Okay, great. And then the ad hoc members, I know Carl is here, Sean, Ashley, anybody else?
Rick's here.
Yep, and Rick Kelsey is here as well. Okay, so we'll turn it over, and the Board of Selectmen, introduce ourselves.
Rick Shar.
Lou Pear.
Sue Bransfield,
Jim Truck. Ben Serb. Ralph Zampano.
and we'll go right into the presentation.
All right, thank
Hey, Brian. We are being taped, so if you would use the microphone, that would be of great help.
Okay.
One second before we get started. Susan, on the agenda, if I may.
We're not having anything other. We're only having this.
The other is removed?
Yes. It's not there.
Okay, yeah,
We're not
that
doing
would
it.
not have met the
I won't
rules
do
tonight,
that.
so I wanted.
That was my error. I apologize for
No
that.
problem. Thank you.
We have
It's only the presentation.
another member of our committee just came in as well, Jess Labadia. So just a couple of quick updates from my last briefing to you back in December. For all intents and purposes, the design is complete. We'll talk about a couple of issues when we get there. There was a question at that time about the anticipated construction schedule or when the park would be ready for use, assuming that we go out to bid soon and construction starts this spring. Preliminary schedule would show that construction will be completed sometime in the summer of 2019. So there should be some of the amenities available for use then. In terms of field use in fall of 2019, it's too soon to tell on that, possible, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So that's a question there. I mentioned at the December briefing that we were analyzing a lot of options and trade-offs, which we did kind of extensively analyze and discuss those options and trade-offs, considering the park programming and elements, what had been presented to the public at the time of the referendum, considering capital costs and life cycle costs, and also making sure that we had contingency and soft costs considered as we went into construction. So based on that, and based on wanting to stay within the $6 million budget, and on the engineer's opinion of probable construction cost, we think that we've been able to arrive at a package that preserves the desired functions of the park. And we're structuring some things as add alternates in the bid process that right now, based upon the opinion of cost, don't fit into the budget, but that we would get pricing on and include if it made sense. And those items are the recreation barn, some furnishings and fixtures such as benches, trash cans, so on, field under drains for both the soccer and baseball fields, some plantings. We would still have some key plantings for shade and for buffers, a basketball court, and then also conduits for future lighting. There was no lighting contemplated in the design here, but there was a provision for installing a conduit to carry those electrical lines. So those would be included as add alternates. We have one permitting wrinkle that was thrown at us recently in our discussions with the Connecticut DOT office. I always get it confused whether it's OTSA or OSTA. I think it's OTSA. For the approval of the modifications, proposed modifications to the of Strickland Street's connection to Route 17. One question they had is, are you getting any state money for this? We said no, assuming that we were not getting any state money for construction, and that if we were getting a state money, or that potentially a floodplain management certification from DEEP would be required. DOT asked us to inquire of DEEP based upon the design phase of the project, getting a steep grant. Does that count as being enough state money into the project to require a floodplain management certification? And after about 2 months of non-response, DEEP came back and said yes. So
Yes, you need.
yes, you need a floodplain management certification from DEEP, which is essentially DEEP confirming that all the analysis that you've done, that there's no net impact to the flood-prone areas is blessed by DEEP, and which is a process that could, take a couple of months at least to get that from them. So the primary, the other issue that's out there is the concept for the park entrance and modification of Strickland Street. And I think I shared this, I may have shared this with you last time, but I'll show it now. As you know, Strickland Street comes into Route 17, Gospel Lane, at a pretty sharp angle, oblique angle. And the concept of creating the entrance to the park is to modify Strickland Street, have the park entrance onto Strickland Street, but to modify the intersection from Strickland Street into Route 17 to make it more of a T, to make that a kind of a safer intersection and have better sight lines and so on. And indicate this is what was presented to the state, and that was pretty much accepted, but we had been waiting to file the final paperwork on that until we resolved the floodplain management certification issue. Subsequent to or while we were waiting for that, and kind of concurrently with that, and looking at all the costs, this is not an insignificant, the estimated cost to make these modifications to Strickland Street and to the entrance to Route 17 is roughly about $400,000, estimated to be about $400,000. And the majority, a significant portion of that is to raise, because this is a little bit below Route 17, is to kind of ramp this section of Strickland Street, the proposed new Strickland Street, up, and so on. One of the alternatives that the committee was considering is to, as a way to save money on the project, would be to have Strickland Street instead end in a cul-de-sac, have the entrance to the park come off of that cul-de-sac, and close off the connection from Strickland Street to Route 17. And we think that would save the project on the order of $300,000. Obviously, there are issues related to that in terms of traffic flow through the adjoining neighborhood and other concerns. And so, the committee at our meeting earlier this month made the recommendation that the town consider that option. If the Strickland Street modifications as designed here were to go forward, and all everything is still be contained within the $6 million budget, we would probably have to be prepared to take some other significant piece of programming out of the park to cover that cost, whether that's eliminating a field, eliminating a playground, whatever. We would make those decisions or analysis to do that. Another option is to bid the project with the Strickland Street improvements excluded or as an alternate, and get some certainty as to where we are in terms of budget and cost, and make some final decisions there. If this is truly the desired, best preferred alternative, to do that, that's an option of buying a little more time to get a little bit more information to make another decision, to make a more informed decision on whether we can do everything within the budget that we have. That's kind of the issues at a high level in a nutshell, and we'd be happy to answer any questions on that or engage in discussion about either what's we've included or not included in the final design or the Strickland Street. And again, this is, as I mentioned in December, there's a lot of hard work again from the committee and the staff, and I want to acknowledge that. We really didn't get started on this full speed until the engineer came back on board in August. So we think it's a good amount of work to be done within within that 4-month period.
Is there anything else that you wanted to tell us in terms of schedule or anything about
Schedule, it's the committee's recommendation that we try to move this out to bid soon. We think that the timing is right to be able to do this. If we were to proceed with the construction without the entrance and Strickland Street modifications finally decided, one of the questions that we thought about, and we got sort of advice from the engineer on what type of risk do we run? Do we run into an issue where we may run up against not having a permit to be able to proceed to a next phase of work where we get stuck at a point? And the only thing that we see is that OSTA had some type of guidance that because if this was generating traffic onto a state road, they typically restrict you from starting any foundation work until you've got your approval. Now, that seems to be geared towards a development or a building type of project and not a park. I don't know at this point whether there's any leeway or discussion that could be had with OTSA about that. But looking at the preliminary schedule of phasing that the engineer has prepared, and they considered foundation being both retaining wall and foundation for building. I think that's at least 6 to 8 months out after start of construction is kind of the estimate now. So we do have time to be able to to resolve the issues and not run into a bind with not being able to, having to stop the project.
Does the committee have a recommendation as to how they would like to see us proceed?
I think by staying within, I think the committee would prefer to bid the project out as like I said, with the even if as soon as we can, even if the entrance issue is unresolved, so that we can go ahead and get the pricing and start things and have time to finalize that. In terms of the again, the recommendation to consider an alternate to what was finally designed here was our recommendation that we consider the cul-de-sac. But we know there's other issues, and we're not the decision makers on that. We just recommended that be considered.
Rick, start with you.
Okay. I'm pretty new to this, so I'm not really up to speed on the plan, but is there, you might have touched on it, but could you have an entrance to the park right from Gospel Lane and just not mess with Strickland Street?
I don't think you'd be able to leave Strickland Street. You wouldn't be able to leave Strickland Street as it is and have an entrance to the park.
Okay.
So if you...
Like, I was just looking further north on
Right.
Gospel Lane, like where you come into the...
Mess things up, Kevin, here. So as you recall, you start to come up a hill over here.
Okay.
And this is, again, pretty, where the crest of the hill is here. To do something further north, you've got both topographical issues as well as then sightline issues because of the shortened distance from coming over the crest of the hill. So that's the main impediment to trying to move the entrance up here. Leave Strickland as it is, leave enough space between that entrance and another entrance to be able to come in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question. I know that was it $6 million for this project?
Yes.
And is it possible that when you go out to bid that it might come in under 6 million?
It's very possible. We hope it does.
Okay.
So the 6 million is our all-in budget. So that includes construction costs, oversight costs, bonding costs, as well as what we're planning for contingency as well for unanticipated changes. So, there are some items that the committee, within the bid, that the committee felt, the estimator seemed to be a little high on, didn't make sense to us, but, that's their professional opinion. So, we think that we're hopeful, but, we need to be prudent based upon the advice that we're given, which is why we kind of structured things like that, and why we're also suggesting that, a way to look at this further is to get out to bid and actually get some certainty to what we actually are dealing with for a bid price.
Thank you.
I know one of the questions or one of the things we've talked about in those meetings is risk. And one of the risks that we're concerned about is if it doesn't go out to bid and you miss the bid window, you miss the bid cycle, and we push back a year, and another inflation cycle, et cetera. When the committee is talking about this, do they consider that the risk of going out to bid now with some of these unknowns is less than the risk of waiting on, to try to get all the answers and then go out?
I think that's correct. I think, while, this is kind of the ideal time to bid because most of the contractors who will be doing this work are probably idle or not doing too much work, so trying to hit them in winter is good. Not that you can't go out to bid in the spring or the summer, but, they're typically a little bit busier. But, we also would, risk losing a fair amount of the construction season as well on timing, and certainly you have inflation and escalation risks as well by delaying the project.
Ben?
Sure, I got a handful of things. First, if you could walk me through the money that we got from the
You
steep.
could just.
Sure. The money that we got from the steep grant.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, in my opinion, these are two different animals. I think the town of Portland should be the one putting in an application to realign Strickland Street completely separate. The park could exit onto Strickland Street very easy. We own that road, it's our property, we're allowed to put a park there, we're allowed to exit, period. There's a separate thing going on where we want to make Strickland Street safer as a town. The town should be the applicant in that part of the park on realigning that road. Wouldn't that then take that steep money out? Because we didn't get any steep money to realign the road, correct? Because there hasn't been, right? Okay. So,
Well,
I don't know if it was that specific. I think the steep money provisions were probably pretty vague in terms of, designing a park, but, that was.
but the park has nothing to do with the town. Just look at it the way I am right now.
Yep.
The town has the right to realign Strickland Street because it's a dangerous road. We have a handful of these roads in town that are they're just dangerous. They're bad. They come out at the wrong angle. They're fixable. The town wants to fix Strickland Street. It happens to coincide with, yes, we're going to build a park. But they're two different animals.
They are, but I think there's some contingency there. I don't think we could build the park without making a modification there.
Well, I would argue by putting in a dead end, you're then forcing everybody down one side, including the safety apparatus. The dead end is, I sat through all the beginning meetings when we talked about a park, the neighborhood went up in arms. The dead end, you'd be much better off leaving the road alone and teeing to Strickland, which we own and we're allowed to do, and not dead ending it.
No, I'm not. My only point is that if you left the intersection with Strickland and Gospel Lane as it is, and had the park tee into Strickland, I don't think that's a good approach.
That's better than just having the cul-de-sac.
And you're right.
From a safety, just getting apparatus, you have one way in, one way out. I understand that's an ugly intersection. I've lived here my whole life. It's not good, but it does function. We are trying to make it better as a town, separate application, and that's how maybe we didn't do it that way, and maybe we then need to start doing it that way with the state so they get this floodplain. We just want to realign our road separate. Whether we have to reapply now and do it separate, that's not part of the park. We can then do whatever we want with Strickland because we own it.
Mhm.
They are two different animals. The realignment to Route 17 is because the town wants to make that road better. It happens to be because we're doing some other things up, right around the corner. But they're two different animals. And then I think it eliminates the steep money. I think it eliminates all this floodplain mapping because we're just realigning our road is the only thing we're doing in the state right-of-way. We're not building the park in the right-of-way. We're teeing to our new Strickland or our old Strickland, regardless, we're teeing to that. That has nothing to do with the state. And we can step it that way with the state. Because if they say no, we just don't realign the road. It's their choice. They're leaving a dangerous intersection, that's their choice. We want to make that intersection better. That's a separate animal. So I think that's how we need to go about,
But I don't think that changes the floodplain issue, because that has to do with the design you did on the property. That's, you use steep funds for that, and that's why they're looking for.
But it's the OSTA is the one that says, are you, and I don't know if what OSTA's interpretation of that and how long we could challenge it, and, the other risk is getting into a legal battle with OSTA, but.
we don't want to do that.
No, we don't want to do that, but I understand your point, Ben, about, making these, if they're separate issues, does that take the floodplain certification requirement from OSTA's point of view, because it's not a state money issue?
Exactly.
And I don't know whether that's strict, if I don't know enough about it, I'd have to ask the engineer, the traffic engineer, if, OSTA just considers the roadway modifications or considers the project that's generating traffic. I mean, part of this is that we're putting in a traffic generator as part of this as well. So, but if that's, if that traffic generator just goes out into Strickland Street, and that takes OSTA out of it, then, that's a potential.
To give you an example, I think legally, we could just tee off of Strickland if we didn't want to modify that to make it better for the community. And traffic can go both ways legally. We're trying to tee that intersection because we can all recognize it is a dangerous intersection, and it is fixable, and we're trying to do what's right. And I think the state should recognize that at the end of this. But regardless, if we separate the two, I think it will eliminate, hopefully, your floodplain issue and hopefully all the uncertainties. Because the reality is, I think we can come to the town road now. We can go both ways, not ideal, but it is better than a cul-de-sac. I mean, the cul-de-sac is going to become an issue. I sat through all those meetings with all those residents, and the cul-de-sac's going to become a big issue. And I remember from the beginning, I think we actually told them, we're not going to do that. And here we are, it would become a.
Well, there were some people who were very much in favor of a cul-de-sac. I think the people who lived on Strickland Street would have loved to have seen, some of those people expressed great favor for a cul-de-sac. Others did not, but I acknowledge your point.
They only wanted the cul-de-sac when there was a separate entrance for the park. If you're planning on dumping all the traffic into that cul-de-sac and out that neighborhood, that was not ever on, that animal would become a problem. And I don't think this late in the game, we need to start creating big problems, in my opinion.
Okay, understood.
But keep up the good work.
So I just want to understand, so what you're saying is, we should bring the park in on Strickland, so therefore we're not having to deal with the Gospel Lane issue, because we're coming into Strickland, so you're saying the DOT is going to have no say
Well,
on the traffic?
the DOT would still have a say because of assuming that the town went separately to make a proposal modification to the intersection to Strickland Street. The state would have an effect on that, and certainly the projections of traffic from the park would probably be part of the analysis of what the state would consider in looking at that intersection modification. It's just a separate project, therefore there's no taint of state money, so it's there's no need for the floodplain certification.
Right, because if we dump all the traffic over to Bartlett, the state's going to want to check that out too. At least by leaving the scenario with both, you can arguably 50-50 split it.
I do want to read what our engineer, he wrote to me, an email, and I'm not going to give all of it, but he says, "It's a shame that DEEP was unsure of the need for this permit," meaning this flood management certificate, "and that it took them so long to make a determination. It's our strong opinion," and that's Weston and Sampson, "that the project has no significant or detrimental impact on the flooding whatsoever. The site's flooding is caused by a backwater condition, backup flooding from the Connecticut River, not from floodwater that is being exacerbated by the town's development of this site. In addition, our site contains adequate compensatory storage, further decreasing any impact. Seems that the state is obligated to go through the process since their funding was used to develop the basis for the ultimate construction project. The statutes are pretty clearly written as such."
Yeah, so it's not an issue of what, I don't think we would get issues from the state, it's just a matter of the time and the additional cost that we have to prepare the application and so on, so.
So he was, I don't know if he spoke to the committee about this, but he goes on to say that they're contemplating a request for a general permit application, which would be highly abbreviated in terms of the duration of review. This is a current thought. They don't know if that would be approved by Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, but they will consider that in the coming days and get back to us. So, you know, when you do the individual permit, I think the preparation for that is a lot longer. If it's a general permit, it's not as complicated an application, and the review process, of course, would be better. But from what he's saying, it definitely seems it's in the statutes. Our engineers are not disputing that, but we were waiting, and we waited a long time for DEEP to answer the question. It was asked in the fall, and they just answered us in January. So I just wanted to clarify that part.
Yeah, I'd say unfortunately because of that, we've never gotten a response from the DOT about the entrance. So we don't know if they would be good or bad with it. We don't have a sense of it.
Well, I mean, we have the indication that it seems that they would be accepting of it. I mean, we were awaiting our final submission until we had that issue resolved, so,
So you said a lot, you had a lot.
You don't think I spoke enough? Normally, you're telling me to be quiet.
So, may I,
Well,
go ahead, Ralph.
Well, I guess there's a couple things, I'm trying to think, I forgot one of them now, but what I was gonna say is with regards to the criticality in terms of getting the bidding out is, I just wanted to point out, having been part of the process, was that we went through a reevaluation of what was gonna be in the park once we were given a number that was gonna be put on the bond. So we went through a process there. We've essentially gone through 2 more iterations, and so we've probably been impacted by inflation rates at least twice. So that's why, you know, the concern is that obviously if you miss this window here, you may be looking at a third hit from inflation. Now, who knows what the status of construction right now, whether you know it's going to be critical that or if they're already booked, or so that was one of the things I just wanted to point out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's not a huge project from many contractors' point of view. So in terms of capacity to do the work, I don't think we're too in the marketplace. I don't think we're too worried about that. Plus, with other, you know, general dampening of spending, certainly at the state level and other municipalities and so on, I think that's probably not a lot of work competing with it at this time, but just a guess on that.
And the committee, to that point, is the committee has done an excellent job of being able to get through each iteration and still sitting there where the only real potential hit we're seeing could be the rec barn. So everything else that was listed, you know, in the referendum information, all of the main features are still okay, except for potentially the rec barn isn't at all. So, so we're in an okay place, you know, as the committee. So the committee's in an okay place in terms of that.
And I guess, you know, Ben, as a follow-up question to you, I mean, your thoughts on funding, if we were to break apart the Strickland Street modifications from the park in terms of as far as the state is concerned, would you see the Strickland Street modification still being part of the $6 million project budget?
Yeah, because I think in the beginning, we sold it as a separate entrance, which had a cost.
Okay. No, I just wanted to clarify. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's the only reason.
Yep.
Other than that, I would say no, but from the beginning, we had a big.
We had an entrance
purchase,
as part of
we
it.
had a separate
Yep.
entrance, all part of this project. That was in the $6 million. So I think from that standpoint, we're hard pressed to sell to the taxpayers that, hey, by the way, now we're going to do all this. No, I think if it wasn't, realigning any dangerous intersection in town, I do believe would come out of the other part of the $10 million bond we did save some for things exactly like that. But in this case, we were going to fix Strickland as part of the project, and I would just say,
Mhm.
that's part of the project.
Can I ask another question? On your adults, do you have sort of a sequence of, this is our first
Yes, I think
priority
the rec barn would be the first priority. I think some of the furnishings and fixtures. We may look at some of the field under drains for maybe one of the soccer fields as a priority over some of the others. The plantings, we looked at things, I think that we wanted to think of what would be hard or easy to do later if someone wanted to do something. So, putting stuff that involves more excavation after the fact, we thought would be costly to do later if someone in 10 years from now or something wanted to make a modification for something, it's going to be more costly to do that, so we would try to put that in. But, I think the recreation barn was definitely the first priority.
Well, it would seem to me that if you have underground work, like the drains and the electric conduits.
Mhm.
that-
Yeah, the electric conduits, the reason why we ranked that lower was, in reality, we thought of, what would be the likelihood of having money available to actually put lights in, was probably going to be, likely be an issue. That would take a long time for that to come around again, was one of the reasons we had that as lower, but I understand your point on that. We would still do the utilities for the rec barn, utility corridors for the rec barn to a pad location, but that's all as part of the base. But and the field under drains, the primary advantage of the field under drains is that you're able to use the fields more quickly after a heavy rain. Drains a little better, and you're kind of tied in with. It's kind of a system, really, of what do you have for the turf zone, what do you have for drainage, and then if the under drains accelerate that drainage, then you're making the fields more playable sooner. Given the nature of the soils out there, and will be proposed. Yeah, they would drain pretty well. So we didn't see that's kind of we saw that as a nice to have and not a must have. Certainly, more durable and playable fields is a plus. But if we that was seen as an acceptable trade-off by the committee, which includes representatives of people who are very involved, either currently or past, in the sports programs and field maintenance as well from the town's perspective.
I guess I just had a couple things. One is a specific question, and I think your committee may have answered this already, but I ran into one of the residents that live right on the, I guess it would be the south
Mhm.
end. And his concern is that his backyard, I think I might have said this to you on the phone, is going to be 20 feet above him, or 15 feet above his land. And he doesn't want that in his backyard.
No, so the fields are actually going to, the parks is actually going to be lower than the adjoining properties. So there's no,
Would that be is it Michael Drive?
Carl? Yes,
Is it
right, Michael?
Michael Drive.
So there's actually as you look at the property from Strickland Street, the far southeasterly corner is actually going to be cut down quite a bit, and there'll be a retaining wall built along there, and the retaining wall eventually tapers out partway down that side.
Toward the park.
Yeah, so there's a.
So is it 20 feet of a berm in his
No.
backyard?
So this is actually lower than these
Houses.
properties here. There's not a berm over here. Kind of same thing here. It might, by the time you get down here, it might be close to grade. I'll have the before and after contours on here. And then there's vegetative plantings here as well, which the specs call for consultation with the owners in choosing those. There's actually a gap here, which I think is the property in question.
Could be,
Someone
yeah.
said, I don't want any
Right,
trees there,
I think he did, yeah.
then I suppose we would honor those wishes. But there's no berm, there's no, and the park is essentially at or below grade of those backyards.
So I will tell him that. In terms of the entrance, certainly, I know that a lot of thought has gone into this. And I did go to the ASTA presentation, and some of the comments were when you come right out on 17, you want to be certain that there's enough room for cars as they're entering, that they're able to get into the park, and they're not queuing up onto 17, either coming from Glastonbury or coming from Dairy Queen. So that was some questions that were being resolved. And then whether or not there would be stop signs. They originally had thought there would be a three-way stop. You come in off of Gospel, stop, Strickland stops, the park stops, and then you each take your turn. But I think they changed that.
They did, so that if you, if you're coming into Strickland from Route 17, you would not have a stop at the park entrance. You could continue going, or stop to make a left. Same thing, I think we basically took out all the stop bars except for the one coming out of the park.
I mean, that plan shows, Brian, substantial improvements to Strickland Street
Yes.
as it stands. So as to Ben's point, there's a huge improvement in the safety in terms of coming onto 17. There's still going to be concerns, and I think they're still determining sight lines and making sure that that's well done. But in terms of the way it is now, to your point, Ben, the way it just comes to that V is not safe. And I know I get a lot of complaints about speeders, particularly during golf season, because people have to make their tee time, and they're coming in really fast across 17 and cutting into Strickland. And we placed a stop sign because of the traffic to make sure people could get off John Place and could come from Strickland and stop and make sure that everybody could turn and so forth onto John Place or come off of John Place. So that was a minor improvement, but there is speeding, so that's a big improvement. It's costly, but it would be, I think, a big improvement. They discussed the cul-de-sac option. The engineers there kind of liked that because I think somebody at the table had said that would make Strickland come to the end, that's it. If you come into the park, you come out of the park, you're only using Gospel Lane, you're not using Strickland. So there's pluses and minuses to that, too, or whether or not they could gate it, so.
Yeah, I think, I don't think that, and I could be wrong, I don't think the state would be happy with a gate across 17, or you could gate, your gate across Strickland, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and I
Like
think.
we have on Butler Lane,
Yeah.
the
So.
high school.
Right, and so I think that, this kind of keeps the second means of ingress and egress out of the neighborhood besides Bartlett Street, makes this safer, provides a safe entrance, kind of coming in and not coming directly out of the park onto 17, makes that safer. It's, looking all the different iterations, that seem to be the best solution. So, as I said, it adds some, it's costly. There are other ways of doing it, but there are trade-offs with those, as we've discussed, and.
But you're improving a town road.
Right.
You're obviously allowing for the entrance and the exit for the park, and you're improving, I would argue, a state road, because the traffic coming onto a state road is coming on safer than it's coming on now from the town road. So there's a lot of advantages to it. The unfortunate piece is the cost.
Right, which is kind of why we're advocating, saying, let's go out to bid and see what we get.
See what you get.
And maybe we can afford it after all. Or maybe we can afford it without having to, take away from anything else that's is considered
But
core
I know
programming of the
for
park.
selectmen, anytime we can, and I think as Board of Selectmen members, anytime we can improve a town road at the same time we're doing another project, there's an advantage to that. And if there is enough dollars, it's safer for the people using the park, it's safer for the neighborhood, and safer for anybody traveling through the town. 'Cause 17, while it's not a heavily trafficked road, there's a lot of people that use that to get to the golf courses, to get to East Hampton, and also all those neighborhoods and businesses that are in that vicinity. So seeing those pictures in your description was helpful to me, certainly. I think you have to see what the bids are in order to make a good decision. I want to open it up to the committee. There may be some committee members that want to make some comments and hear your thoughts. I know you've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours, and not just at meetings, but also reading and going on field trips. There's been a tremendous amount of research done on this project. It kind of started in 2005-06, I think, when Ralph was on the Park and Rec Commission, buying the land, paying for the land, planning, as well as getting into the detail. So I want to thank you. I do recognize the amount of time and talent that you're using. Your work isn't done. You got a lot more work to do, so, but I do want to recognize everyone that's been involved with this, from town staff that helped with the purchase years back when Rick helped negotiate to get the land, Mr. Goodrich, cooperation. I mean, there's been a lot to this project, and it's a lot of people in town that are helping. Mr. Chairman, you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. It's all, everyone else here, so.
Yeah.
Anyone have anything else to add, or? Gonna leave out anybody's thoughts?
So I think the consensus sounds like we'd like to see this go to bid so that we know what we're talking about.
And I think there is an opportunity, I think, to try to push back on DEEP perhaps on this and look at, whether that's, where's the steep grant come from, OPM, or I don't know who, or DECD
Yes.
or something?
Ultimately, it's OPM, and then I think it was OPM that administered this grant, if I'm correct. So while they contributed $230,000 to the planning, there's additional dollars that the town is contributing toward these actual plans and all the changes.
And really, the final engineering design of the roadway, that was, whatever the concept was, was really very little, other than, no engineering was really, there was some survey work done and, some planning work done, but the engineering and the hard design for the roadway improvements was not done with state money. So
Because in the beginning, it was a separate entrance, correct?
it was a separate entrance, and we had gotten to that point of saying, okay, this is what we want to do. We don't own that land. It's the concept. And once we go forward, we have to, do the hard engineering for, both secure the land or whatever else, analyze the options and do the hard engineering for the entrance and the street improvements. So, very, very small amount of state money went into putting those lines on the map.
Not where we're talking. They're
Right.
separate. That wasn't, so I would argue none. I think none of the steep grant was used.
No, but I think, as I read that, it's because the state money is involved with this project at all, and because they require this when there, is it a 100-year floodplain?
Well,
it's
so it's basically within the, within the 100-year flood plain, or the flood, if they probably don't call it that, they probably call it the flood hazard area or something, defined flood hazard area. And it's written for state agencies.
Right.
So it's not really written, if you read the regs and the statutes, it doesn't say, if you're a town and you got state funding for something, it's really, written as if it's state agencies that are doing the work. But it's interpreted as well that if you're getting state funding, then that's kind of triggers it also. So I think obviously DEEP has got a very conservative approach to interpreting that, because, they don't want to take any risk of, it's safer for them to say sure, than no.
Right, and I think it would pass deep, I think.
Yeah, no question. I don't think there's any issues that they would not approve it. It's just the time and the expense of getting it.
And that's why I think you're almost better off now stating, we didn't use any of the steep money for that, and if this project alone doesn't trigger it, we should be good. I think if, if they look at it that way, because I'm not sure they are looking at it that way, but if they, if you guys have a new conversation with them and saying, hey, if you look at it this way, because no money was used, we did not use any of the state money, then would it trigger it, yes or no? And if they say no, then you're good, and if they say yes, well, we're back to where we are right now.
Having dealt with state agencies, we know that once they see something, they typically,
And we,
but it can work.
So I
Yes.
just want to make sure, you
Chris.
guys are kind of leaning toward the recommendation of the road entranceway based on that last design with the sweep bin thing, with the wetland issue. And that's the recommendation that we're going to go, that's plus.
Right, but that we would,
$300,000.
but we would go with, but
Well,
also,
I
go
understand
ahead.
we're going to bid later,
Yeah.
bid on stages. Is any negotiation, conversation with the Triangle properties dead?
No, they're not dead.
Because I still would argue that's still gonna be a cheaper alternative than this, $300,000 add-on, just to do this
Yep.
sweeping in.
No, it's not dead. In fact, I told the owner that at the time he wanted an answer, that we weren't prepared to spend the money to buy the land, but to please know that we may come back and ask to buy it. We couldn't come to a price that we felt was within the budget, so we stopped the negotiations, but we didn't say never.
Right, because I would still think doing that entranceway as it was designed as the triangle with the purchase price is probably less than $300,000 that we would spend on this design.
well, I would argue the linear footage is probably the same, correct, if not longer through the triangle?
Yeah, it's flat though,
Plus the
but
cost
it's,
of land.
it's less complicated,
But it's not as built up.
no,
I
it's,
think if you take the linear, you've got a better,
yeah, it's an alternative, it's another alternative.
yeah, yeah.
Good suggestion, Chris, yeah. I mean, we want to do the safest thing and what's going to improve everything there, not only the park, but for the people who live there as well as those who travel through, so.
Do you have a
I'm used to this.
sketch, or can you show what you're talking about on the map?
Let me, sure.
Based on what was
It kind of goes off the map here, but,
Okay.
there's we call this triangle piece, so
Oh.
as 17 comes down here,
Yeah.
there's a piece of property here that.
Yeah, it's all in here, right?
There's
It's all-
corn, there's dead corn there.
Yeah, why didn't they silage
We
that
don't have an
corn?
answer for that.
Well,
It's not on
okay.
the agenda.
Not on the
thank
agenda.
you.
All right, okay.
It goes under other.
Yep.
So, the concept was to have that come out more, close this off, really, and have Strickland Street now come in more of a T here, curve back in, and then you could either take a left to go to the park, or take a right to go down.
Oh, and then this would be eliminated.
This would be eliminated,
Because there's no residents in here, right?
correct. The closest
Okay.
residence is over here, so you'd come in like that. and
But
you'd close that
to
off.
do that, you have to buy this cornfield essentially?
Correct.
Who owns that?
The same gentleman that sold that land to us, Nelson Goodrich.
Oh, okay.
And he's always said that it is something that he's willing to talk to us about. So he's been very cooperative. So we can, certainly, I know what the price was last year. I don't know if it's the same, but we can, I'll share that with Brian offline.
So, I mean, I guess the only challenge we have is trying to determine how we have the engineers put together the drawings that separate the entrance and
Well-
three different ways that we've talked about, so that you're divorcing the three different ways from it, I guess.
And that's fine, I mean, it's easy enough to, on the existing plans, is to draw a line and have an arrow that says not in contract. I mean, it's pretty easy to kind of, to do that to the existing plans. So there's not much modification needed to
And
the,
is that what the committee's recommendation is at this point?
I believe that's what the committee's recommendation is to go out and let's do that and go out and get some certainty. You know, we're doing the best we can with the best information that we have. There's some things that we, you know, for example, some of the equipment is available through state contracts.
Right.
So we have some certainty on, you know, playground equipment and so on. But, you know, there's other things that are, you know, our estimates at this point. And again, we're hopeful that we think there's some conservativeness built into all that. But, you know, would be anxious to see what we would actually get, and then we can, you know, be more comfortable, I think, making decisions with that and have a little more certainty on the budget.
You gotta know what money.
Because having more, getting more money is not an option, we understand that. So there's no process for us to say, okay, we need to increase the budget to 6.05 million. I mean, you know,
But until
it's,
it's bid,
or
Brian,
anything
you
else.
don't know for
Correct.
certain
Correct.
what the dollars will be.
Right.
You don't know till you bid, right?
That's why it's important to get out to bid. That's
Yeah.
going to give us the answers.
Because we've been surprised many times when things go out to bid, that sometimes they're very positive and sometimes, you know. I
Right.
think the estimates estimators are doing the best they can. They tell me they're.
It's a, you know,
Successful
there's
on
an
other
art to it,
projects.
is, you know, as well as a science. I mean, you know, so.
How far along did we get on the engineering through the Goodrich Triangle?
No, we didn't do any roadway design work. We did some survey work, and that was it. So we did survey.
I was just thinking, to his point, if we had an A and a B, bid A, bid B.
No, we don't.
We're not there.
No, no.
This
Then
is
we'd
the
know
application that
if it
went
was
to
a
us.
150 and, you know,
The-
to pave it and,
This binder here, this is what went to the Office of State Traffic Authority.
okay.
So there's a lot of work to these applications. And if you change it, you gotta
Right.
change the book again.
I mean, that would be the other thing too, is if we go with this, we've already done that. It's there. And we, you know, we think it's, you know, we think that even there would be even less, you know, that because you're removing the ability to keep going 60 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour into Strickland Street to pick up your kid from daycare. I won't say to go golfing. I'll give another, not everyone who speeds on the street is going golfing. That, you know, you would eliminate that. You'd probably have less traffic even going there. People would just continue down to Bartlett and turn left there rather than navigate the turn here. You know, maybe even less coming the other way as well from Bartlett through Strickland up
And
to
the
that area.
neighborhood, at some of the public hearings, said they want the ability to go out that exit.
Right.
Onto 17, it saves them time. They have concern for safety, so, you know, they want to be able to use that as well.
It won't hurt their necks as much trying to turn left as
Well,
they're
you
trying
know.
to get out of there either, so. Mike?
From a permitting standpoint, I don't think we can necessarily suspend everything we're doing, such as the DOT permit and the flood management certification. So we've got to keep these things moving at the same time, even if there might be some changes in the future. We can't abandon the path. Take the entrance off the table, and then I think we're going to go back later and say, now we have an entrance, and now we're going to get a different flood management certification.
Well, the application's in for this, that's shown here, for that entrance and exit. I haven't heard anything back from Weston and Sampson after that meeting.
No, I mean, if we wanted to, we can get a proposal from them to prepare the floodplain management certification application. What would it take to do that? It's probably fairly small dollars in the grand scheme of things, and therefore be able to complete the final submission to OTSA on that. You know, we could do that without waiting, and that would be, you know, wouldn't be a lot of expenditure for that, for the trade-off of keeping this moving, but we can get that information from them.
I think what they're waiting for, Mike, is whether we can do the general permit application or whether it has to be a specific permit.
I'm not quite following that, you know, what kind of general permit they're doing. This flood management certification is a program unto itself, as I understand it. So there's no getting around So they may be talking about a general permit for stormwater or something like that, stormwater management. I don't see where it affects this, but, I'm not, a lot of experience in this, but it seems like the process is pretty much one path here.
So, Sue, if you go back and try to buy the land and change the intersection, you have to do another whole application, and you still gotta buy the land, you're gonna kill a lot of time.
And the impact with the wetlands is something that would.
There'd probably be less impact to the wetlands with that option.
It's a different, there's the cost of the purchase, there's the cost of the planning, as well as the construction. Would be different. I don't know whether it'd be better, same. If it's better, that's good. If
Well, I
it's-
guess what I'm getting at is, how much time are they gonna lose on the project? Or is it gonna hold you up from going out to bid?
No, I don't think, no, so we think that we would be able to go out to bid. In the phasing of the project, the roadway and entrance work is the last piece of work to be done. So, there's time there. I mean, the only caveat that I mentioned was the, kind of the restriction from, that OTSA had on foundation, but I think if we were able to divorce it as a separate project, to Ben's suggestion, that issue would probably go away. Even if the floodplain management certification stayed with it, the restriction on not being able to progress a project to a certain point until you had the approval from OTSA could go away. Potentially. I don't have to.
I hope.
We'd have to explore that further to confirm it.
Anybody else from the committee? Or from the selectmen?
My only question was, you mentioned the rec barn, and that was one of the higher priorities. Where does the basketball court, two things, where does the basketball court fall for cost compared to the rec barn? And where does it fall in priority compared to the rec barn?
I think the basketball court was lower than the rec barn, and I think in terms of cost, it's a lot less cost. But I don't know if the basketball court was originally part of the original plan or not. It was something that we got other requests to kind of throw that in, and we also thought that a basketball court is something that's not too terribly difficult, as long as you've got a clear piece of land, not too difficult to put in, so.
And I think you're right. I think originally it was not in.
So you want the history? I'll give you the history.
No, I just want to give my.
No, it's a simple history, is that it was in the original plan,
Yeah.
but then once the bond number was put out there, we had to look at what would get removed, and the discussion was, well, we have the hoops on Main Street, so maybe it's not critical to have the hoops at this time, and that's why I got removed.
Okay, my 2 cents is maybe please look at keeping the basketball court, especially because the cost is much less than the rec barn, and the rec barn to me is just a bigger liability as far as costs and future maintenance for the town. The basketball court would hopefully get a lot of use. We are building a park, so, and I'm looking at it, very generically here. That would be my only 2 cents, lean towards putting it.
And I
if we
think
have the
that,
funds.
yeah, and I think that if we only had, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, $70,000 to spare, I think that, the basketball court would go in. I think the rec barn would get an awful lot of use for running summer camps. It would be the primary use and benefit of that facility. That's one of the reasons why it's in there. And that was also, a prominent part of the original plan as well, so. I don't know if anyone on the committee wants to add anything.
Well, I think
To
we're
that.
coming before any final selection is made.
Oh, we would come back, I think, if we get the bids and there's budget available to, hopefully that's the case, that we would confirm what we'd be awarding, certainly the award of the contract, which would have to go through the board, would include which alternates are being awarded at that time.
Let's keep our fingers
Do you
crossed for good
have
numbers.
basketball courts, do you have space for them there, or?
Yeah, the space.
Penciled in tentatively?
Kind of penciled in right
Oh,
there.
okay.
one court.
I was sort of thinking the same thing, that why not basketball courts? It just seems to go with the park. But I understand the financial piece, so.
Well, and again, the thought was that that's something,
they could
it's
do
not
well.
coming up with, $200,000 a few years down the road. It's coming up with a lot less money if we wanted to put that in.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Just one
Jeff?
other quick clarification on, to Rick's question earlier about what goes in the ground. It's an add-on to put all the conduit in for the electrical, for lighting and things of that nature. But what the committee did do is look at putting and stubbing conduit underneath anything that's gonna be paved. So that if there is work that has to be done, we're not gonna be looking at ripping up pavement or anything like that. So,
Good
smart way to get it in while it's greenfield and to keep the cost down, but set yourself up for the future.
Do you need anything else from us?
No, a couple of minor things I might follow up with you on later, but I appreciate the opportunity to
Yeah, thank
meet
you
together.
for coming. You've come a long way. I look forward to the bidding. I'll entertain a motion.
Thank you for all the hard work.
Oh, yeah, that is,
So I guess in terms of formal approval to go out to bid, is that, we'll just work through you? Does
typically, the contract would be approved by this board, I believe, as we bid things, so that they know
Okay.
it's going out, they know that things are proceeding.
Okay.
I think it's just a good idea, good practice to bring it back to you, so you know what's gonna happen.
Right, and did you get the comments from the town attorney to?
Yes,
Vote on,
there's some
okay.
comments on the bid documents that are going back and forth between Chris Wester.
Okay,
and-
so they're involved, okay,
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I understand it. John?
So excuse me, we should be coming in front of the selectmen with the bid, for approval to go out as soon as we're ready.
I mean, we meet often.
Yeah.
So it's not like you gotta wait for us. But I think there's a couple issues you wanna resolve, as a committee, and maybe then definitively come, because I'll remind, the board, that the tasks that your committee is charged with are, one, implementation of a design plan, the review of the bid documents as prepared by Weston and Sampson, the issuance of the bid, the review of the bids received, the selection of the construction firm, and the oversight of the construction. And the selectmen have final approval of all aspects of the park project. So that's why you want to bring it to us. And this discussion is simply to give us information so that we're aware of all your work thus far. And then the selectmen will say, we go. I don't think there's anything else on there that, other than then it identifies who's on the committee, and that you will continue to work until the year 20,085. No, you continue to work until everything is finished. It's a lot of work, and I think, as Jim just said, and the other selectmen concur, we thank you, everyone, staff, a lot of the people in town, as well as the committee members that have been given the assignment. We really appreciate what you're doing, as well as Parks and Recreation Commission. It's recognized hereby.
Appreciate it.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second by Jim, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Nice job.